What's good, everyone? Night Cage here. All right, man. Welcome back. Part 2, the Infernal Legion Chronicles. We are going through the birth of the Infernal Legion, the Chaos Legion that I created. This is Codex Chosen of Angron Infernal Legion. So, man, I'm excited. I can't wait to share with you guys what I have. So, if you guys had an opportunity to see part 1, you know exactly what direction I'm going in at this stage, and if not, I'll put it in the description below so you can get that link. All right, so here we go. So, welcome to part 2, and we're gonna get on in now. My codex for the Infernal Legion, my codex covers from front to back the beginning of the World Eaters and up until the time that the World Eaters Legion is destroyed at the Battle of Scalatrax at the hand of Karn the Betrayer. The Legion breaks apart into smaller warbands, and my codex picks up at the stage where the flame is rekindled. Right? So this is what we're going to be talking about today. So I just want to show you, I actually started at the very beginning. Legion background, the Great Crusades started at the very beginning as the Warhounds, and there is so much fluff out there about the World Eaters from the Great Crusade all the way through the Horus Heresy. So I do not feel the need to go through that because it'll just take too long. So I am going to start at the birth of the Infernal Legion, and I'll just do a quick sum up for those who don't know. If you're just joining in and you're not familiar with the World Eaters Legion, let's see, in under a minute, essentially, they were called the Warhounds. The Emperor would unleash them anytime that he felt the need to. And when Angron finally joined the Legion, the name was changed to the World Eaters. Captain Drager said that we will be eaters of worlds, and Angron said, yes, World Eaters. So they went ahead and they changed the name to the World Eaters, and at that stage, Angron started making changes to the Legion. They became homicidal madmen, essentially, because Angron had the apothecaries install the butcher's nails, which basically lobotomizes you and makes you crazy. So, then the World Eaters join Horus during the heresy and betray the Emperor, and they take part in the Isfahan event. So this part covers everything up until the Horus Heresy, and then up until Angron's ascension here. This is when Angron becomes a demon prince at the hands of Lorgar. This is when he's fighting against Gilliman, the Ultramarines Primarch. How the whole process of how Angron became a demon prince is covered there. And then we get into the first war for Armageddon, when Angron finally returns to assault Armageddon, and he tries to it's a last ditch effort on Angron's part to try to repiece his legion back together. And all of the warlords minus Karn the Betrayer all show up on Armageddon to fight with their demon Primarch, and as a result, the Grey Knights end up banishing Angron back to the warp. And the Legion at that stage falls to disarray, breaks into thousands of little warring factions, some as many as 100 Marines, some as many as 1,000 Marines. Nobody really knows. The Legion is no more. End of story. The Legion is dead. So that covers all. So that's what the first part of my book covers, that whole story in detail. And like I said, I just don't feel the need to have to go through all of that. So this is where we are going to begin, though, in my codex. And no, I'm not going to read you guys everything. Again, I'm going to just sum it up. The flame rekindled. The birth of Angron's Infernal Legion. So this is where the Infernal Legion is born. Angron essentially is in his banishment, right? Angron is banished back to the warp, and he is furious at his legion person. He's furious at his legion. So, and the fact that he was banished and he failed. So in this stage, Angron decides that he's going to put together a demonic war council. He's no longer going to put his trust in man. So he forms together a war council that I call the Cauldron of Blood, or the Infernal Lords. The Infernal War Council is made up of 5 bloodthirsters and 3 demon princes. Right? So this is the beginning of the Infernal Legion. This is in its infancy. This war council comes together, formed by Angron, flanked by his crew of Praetoria, his 12 bloodthirster bodyguards. Right? So this is where it begins. Angron forms his war council. And after forming his war council, he starts plotting on how he's going to regain his power, how he's going to get his foothold in the real world, and he realizes that in order to do that, he has to bring his Marine Legion back together somehow. But the question is how. So we get over here, that's Out of the Ashes, that's what that covers. So we get over here to the Slaughter campaigns. And this is where things get really interesting, because the Chaos Lords that who were Praetors in the original World Eaters Legion are now Chaos Lords. And these Chaos Lords are loyal to Angron. They were with him during the Heresy. They were with him during the Great Crusades. They were with him during the Armageddon campaign. They maintained their loyalty to Angron. And these 3 in particular I call the Triad, because these 3 in particular did not break away like all of the others did into these smaller warring factions, but they tried to maintain a semblance of coherency in order within the legion that they tried to maintain, which was relatively small. But they set out the Slaughter campaigns to start rebuilding the legion. Now this is without Angron. At this stage, Angron isn't even aware that his Triad is doing this. So the Triad is made up of the first 3 Lords of Slaughter. That is Lord Koselax the Forsworn, Lord Hans Korin, and Lord Shalik the Elite. So these 3 Chaos Lords, they maintain a strong connection to each other, and they try to maintain as much of the Legion as possible. However, a lot of what was the original World Eaters Legion was basically sundered. So was torn asunder. So these guys tried to keep everything together, and they began what's called the Slaughter campaigns. And essentially what each one of the lords would do is they would find lesser Chaos Lords of Khorne. They would kill those lords, and they would take their legions away from them, take their warbands away from them. And they did this over several hundred years in the warp, several thousands of years within the warp. As you know, in the warp, there's no time. And they amassed a huge amount of Khorne Berserkers and Chaos Space Marines. Now, keep in mind that these are no longer the original World Eaters now. Yes, Lord Koselax, Lord Hans Korin, and Lord Shalik, their legions are their warbands, if you will. Their warbands are pure World Eaters. But when the Slaughter campaigns began, they go about rebuilding the Legion, and they no longer cared if you were originally a World Eater or not. They went about assimilating lesser Khorne war hosts and basically gobbling them up and infusing them into their Legion. And so over the next 1,000 years or so, their warband gets larger and larger and larger until it reaches a critical mass, right? So eventually the warband reaches somewhere near the 20 or 30,000 range, right? And so the Legion is now approaching 50,000 and 60,000, and is just consistently getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so then Lord Koselax the Forsworn, who is the more senior Praetor of the other 2, Hans Korin and Lord Shalik, he's the more senior. He finally makes the decision: we are now large enough to confront our Lord. So at this stage, the 3 Triad Lords decide that they are going to confront Angron now. and try to get back in his good graces after a very, very hard fall at Armageddon. So that's what this part covers. Okay. Age of the Flame, and this right here is the ending part. So as they approach Angron, in his war council, and they find that Angron has amassed 8 great generals, and these generals are all demonic generals, 5 bloodthirsters and 3 demon princes, sitting at the war table with Angron and his bodyguard. And as the triad walk in, Lord Kosalax, who shows no fear to Angron, he basically just walks over to him and he says, and he tells him that, Lord, I have a gift for you. And he shows this great legion that he has amassed. And Angron is impressed that these 3 lords managed to piece together an incredibly large legion that they are now calling the Infernal Legion. And Angron is happy. So Angron assigns each of his Infernal Lords, his war council, he puts them in charge of the Legion. And then we get into the way that the Legion is organized. So Lord Kosalax, who is the more senior Chaos Lord, sets out to organize the Lords of Slaughter. And the Infernal Legion is then born. Now, let's get into the structure, and then I'm going to stop the video here, and then we'll get into part 2. So I want to show you guys the structure of the Legion. So this is the way the Infernal Legion is organized. So the organizational structure for the Legion: Angron at the top with his crew of Praetoria, his honor guard. Under Angron are the 8 Infernal Cauldron Lords. These are the demon lords, the generals. They are in charge of the entire war host, right? It is broken into 8 great hosts, or 8 great companies. The Lords of Slaughter, they are a part of the command structure. So the Lords of Slaughter are the lieutenants to the Cauldron Lords. And basically what the Lords of Slaughter do is each one is in charge of a particular role that his battle company specializes in. And each Lord of Slaughter is assigned to one of the Cauldron Lords. Each of the great companies, or the great host, each of the great hosts is shaped to the liking of that particular Cauldron Lord. But the Lords of Slaughter are the ones who carry out the actual orders. They are the ones who are who control the physical command structure in the Legion. Okay, the Lords of Slaughter make up the command fleet command. They make up the armory, the Sky Marshal, and the siege element. And then below that are the Exalted Champions. The Exalted Champions are lesser Chaos Lords, essentially. They answer to the Lords of Slaughter. So they're basically, the Exalted Champions are basically captains. And the Lords of Slaughter are basically praetors, or chapter masters. And above them are the Cauldron Lords, who the Lords of Slaughter answer to directly. And so this is the way that the Legion has been reorganized in the Codex. So I put in a lot of work figuring out a really unique structure that fits into Khorne's Infernal Legion structure as well. Okay, now last part here. So we are going to get into the Cauldron Lords. The Cauldron Lords, these are Angron's Lord Commanders. These guys are in charge of the Legion. They are his war council. Angron has 8 Cauldron Lords: Barbagast the Devourer, Yurika the War Fiend, Skyrak the Slaughterer, Rodokai the Flameborn, Kurgram the Iron Crusher, Abraxas the Butcher King, Doombri the Gore Chosen, and Ka Jaganeth the Blood Tide. Those are his 8 Cauldron Lords. These are the 8. Okay, and this is the end of this video. I'm going to go through this really quickly, and then I'm going to introduce, in the next video, I'm going to introduce each Cauldron Lord. And then in the following video, I'll introduce each Lord of Slaughter. I'm working on getting these guys painted up now. I have a few of them painted that I can introduce to you guys so you can see each one. But I want to, in the future, I am going to show you each one, each Lord, along with the Lord of Slaughter and along with that great host, the way that that great company is organized and what it specializes in. Because this codex is extremely detailed. Okay, so the Lords of Slaughter is the original triad: Kosalax the Forsworn, Stalik the Elite, and Hans Korin the Flame Lord. Okay, under him is Draegr the Everchosen, Gardrak the Blood Lord, Hrothgar Farrar the Ravager, Denethor the Flame Scorpion, and Gorfinn the Bloodied. So these are the 8 Lords of Slaughter. So the 8 Lords of Slaughter, you can see here, this is their specialty. Like Kosalax, for example, has a Berserker Invasion Force. Stalik the Elite has a Cavalry. He's in charge of the Cavalry Shock Force. Hans Korin is the Tactical Occupation Force. Draegr the Everchosen, Armored Command. He is the Exalted Commander of the Ironborn. Gardrak the Bloodlord. He is the Siege Destructor Force. He is in charge of the Demon Engines. Hrothgar is the Planet Strike Specialist. He's the Sky Marshal. He's in charge of all things that fly, and Planet Strike specialization. Denethor the Black, he's the Infiltration Command Force. He's known as the Black King. When we get around to talking about Denethor, there's a whole... Every single one of these characters have their own stories, right? That's another thing we're going to get into. As well as the Infernal Lords too. They also have their own fluff. Both the Lords of Slaughter and the Cauldron Lords all have their own fluff. So we'll get into that, and their special rules. So I essentially have 16 special characters. The Lords of Slaughter are all special characters, and the Infernal Lords are all special characters. They all have their own special rules as well. So we'll get into that later. It's going to take too long now. So I'm going to stop here because this is it for part 2. Part 3, for part 3, we are going to cover the Cauldron Lords, and I'm going to introduce them to you guys one at a time, and so you get a chance to see their fluff and their background for each guy. So like I said, this is going to be a series. This is why I'm calling this the Infernal Legion Chronicles, because it is going to be a bunch of videos. Just to cover this book is probably going to take me 10 or 15 videos to cover it. So thank you guys for listening. I know this was long, but I really appreciate it if you stuck in there, listen, and you heard this thing through. I really appreciate it. Please hit the like button on your way out. I really, really will appreciate it. Thank you very much.